In 1977, reggae legend Peter Tosh released the song Equal Rights, demanding freedom for a number of African nations, but he also mentioned another country. When George Jackson, a Black Panther, writer and revolutionary, was killed by prison guards in 1971, two poems were found in his cell. They were translations of resistance poetry by the Palestinian poet Sami al-Kazim. Peter Tosh and George Jackson's connection to Palestine are just two examples of a long history of solidarity between Black liberation and Palestinian self-determination, two struggles that have been in dialogue for decades.
Yeah, it's so odd that like literally every revolutionary Black figure has a direct connection with Palestine. So strange. Every revolutionary Black figure, both successful and unsuccessful because they were assassinated, or successful and has actually like ended the apartheid in South Africa, for example, every single one has always recognized the situation in Palestine. Always. So strange that these like new Zoomers on TikTok are just having like a brief moment of wrecker behavior that they're demonstrating. It has no historic basis. It's new. It's cynical. I don't give a about it. I don't talk about that usually. So that's it.
In 1964, Malcolm X published an article in the Egyptian Gazette called Zionist Logic, in which he drew parallels between the oppression of Palestinians and Africans. Instead of seeing it as a religious conflict, Malcolm saw Israel as a colonial project serving a wider imperialist agenda, saying European imperialists wisely placed Israel where she could geographically divide the Arab world. In the same year, Malcolm was one of the first African leaders to publicly meet with the Palestine Liberation Organization. As anti-colonial struggles gained traction through the world, freedom for Palestinians became a touchstone for the international fight against imperialism. As Black freedom movements expanded their worldview to situate their struggle as part of a global anti-colonial movement, Palestine also became an important focal point of their solidarity. On August 15, 1967, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee released a position paper entitled The Middle East Crisis, expressing support for Palestine and criticizing US support for Israel. Organizations such as the Black Panthers argued that freedom would never come for Black people in America unless all oppressed people were free. The Panthers frequently spoke of Black communities and their relationship with police as living under occupation as internally colonized people. They were vocal in their support for Palestine and met with the PLO in Algiers in 1969.
Yep. That's why I said like Black liberation groups in the United States of America historically have also directly collaborated with the PLO. They have shared techniques, tactics, like best practices. They've trained as brothers in arms. So like the actual collaborative nature of these movements is so significant. So whenever young like rad libs, Black, white, Kamala Harris supporter, doesn't matter, like whenever they're popping off on TikTok talking against this sort of thing, just remember that there is no historic basis. You're basically undermining Black history in the United States of America when you say some shit like that.
In his 1972 essay, Take Me to the Water, James Baldwin wrote about leaving the US but refusing to go live in Israel, saying, "And if I had fled to Israel, a state created for the purpose of protecting Western interests, I would have been in a yet tighter bind. On which side of Jerusalem would I have decided to live?" Muhammad Ali also declared his support for the Palestinian struggle, marching for Palestinian rights and visiting a Palestinian refugee camp in southern Lebanon. In 1979, Reverend Jesse Jackson met with the PLO and pushed for the US to deal directly with the organization in pursuit of a peace deal.
Just and lasting peace.
Even though it's been so much of what I've been seeing in the last couple of days.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Twitter is so annoying. Reverend Jesse Jackson, the OG Bernard Sanders. You have a lot of goats. Are you a farmer? I mean, he's incredible.
Inextricably
was incredible.
For a state, for Palestinian people, and the recognition of the PLO as the government in exile with which our nation must negotiate.
This was a significant shift in support for Palestine, moving from radical groups to more mainstream figures who were able to lobby for shifts in US policy. 10 years later, Jackson would find himself in an audience in Harlem as Nelson Mandela addressed a packed town hall.
As far as Yasser Arafat is concerned, I explained to Mr. Sidney that we identify with the PLO because just like ourselves, they are fighting for the right of self-determination.
Like Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu drew global attention to the plight of Palestinians as being parallel to that of black South Africans under apartheid.
The inhumanity that won't let ambulances reach the injured, farmers tend their land, or children attend school. This treatment is familiar to me and the many black South Africans who were corralled and harassed.
When did Al Sharpton turn into an asshole? Bro, Al Sharpton has always been a grifter. Like, what do you mean? He went from like being an over-the-top black nationalist to like a spokesperson for the Democratic Party. Like, he's always been that way. He's not like you're talking about a MSNBC contributor, bro. Come on. I think the chatter meant Reverend Jesse Jackson. Oh no, Jesse Jackson is great. I mean, he's I forget. I mean, he's had some like liberal moments overall, but Jesse Jackson's been like a committed figurehead to like worker solidarity. I mean, he's had some issues throughout time, but who doesn't? You know, it is what it is. But like very different than Al Sharpton. Yeah, 1988 Rainbow Coalition. Yeah, he's been with it for a very long time. Black people have always supported any liberation movement, but anytime there's a movement, libs on TikTok act as if we're specifically aren't doing enough compared to any other race in America. It's just weaponizing black struggle. I don't even think, I mean, that definitely does happen. I always say this, like any kind of consideration that puts black people under a microscope that like the broader community of Americans is engaging in is always like a little weird, you know? It's just like what the do you mean? Like you're just like hyper focusing on black people when it's like an American problem. You know what I mean? Liberals love doing that shit and it's lame as. But in terms of like rad libs, whether they're black or white, doesn't matter, on TikTok being like, sweetie, where were the Palestinians during BLM or whatever? Like, first of all, this kind of solidarity is not transactional. The is wrong with you? And secondly, like this is why I always say I don't advocate for the causes I advocate for. Calm down. You are not a guard dog. Good girl. I don't advocate for the things I advocate for so that like black people think I'm cool. I advocate for the things I advocate for because it's the right thing to advocate for. You have to remember that. You have to remember that. And you have to carry that with you, okay? It's just you cannot have a moral compass that swings wildly when like the in-group that you're like what's a better example of this? A better example of this is when like the Barbs were yelling at me. When the Barbs were yelling at me saying I'm a white supremacist. Did I change my attitude? Did I become a white supremacist? Did I become racist? No. Did I change my political messaging even a little bit? No. Okay? Because it bears no basis in my actual analysis of white supremacy and my opinion on police brutality. People chirping at me on Black Twitter will not change my attitude on it. Okay? Because I'm not doing it to get like love and admiration from Black Twitter or Barbs. Your morals should not be swayed by what people in the in-group that you are advocating for think about you. Same goes for trans issues. Of course you didn't. That would be stupid. What are we talking about? There are so many people who do that though. Are you kidding me? People get like negatively polarized against trans people on Twitter because, you know, trans people will be like, oh, you're transphobic because you did this, or you're transphobic because you did that. And then people that are already like on shaky grounds in terms of their commitment to a marginalized group will then immediately write them off and be like, oh, they're insane. It literally happened. It happened with Hogwarts Legacy. People yelled at me about that too. But did I change my attitude about trans people? No, of course not. Because real allegiance and a real commitment to justice, to social justice, does not come from expecting people to return the favor for you or some. It actually comes from understanding why people are angry, why people are reacting the way that they are. Black Chatter here, one of the things I think you might be missing in this discussion is that black liberation movements don't hold the sway they used to in our community, especially for teaching the youth. I have way too many friends who have gone to Dr. Umar for their opinion on Palestine, and a lot of their talking points come from figures like that. No, I know. I understand that. But that's why I'm talking about black liberation movements specifically so that, I mean, just like I talk about the Tulsa massacre when before like Watchmen talked about it and shit, many black chatters themselves were completely oblivious to this part of American black history, including the move bombing, for example. Many black chatters right now probably don't know that in 1985, the Philadelphia Police Department dropped literal live bombs, explosive ordnance on the Africa family on U.S. soil. You know what I mean? People just don't know that. People don't know their own history because it's not. Because this is still ultimately a white supremacist society that teaches, like in public schools, reflects those values in public schools in the school system. A lot of this shit is not taught to people, so I don't, I understand where people are coming from. Even black people still are going to school and getting educated by teachers that have that same curriculum. You know what I mean? It's going to churn out those same results. So my job here is to actually show you what it was like, regardless of my Yakubian Caucasian background.
By the security forces of the apartheid government.
Mandela made a historic trip to Palestine in 1999.
Choose peace rather than confrontation, except in cases where we cannot proceed, where we cannot move forward. Then, if the only alternative is violence, we will use violence.
A statue of Mandela stands in the occupied West Bank city of Ramallah, a gift from South Africa to the people of Palestine. His grandson, Mandela Mandela, continues to be an outspoken critic of Israel.
Release all political prisoners. We want to say to the Israeli government today that give the 6 million Palestinians living in exile their right of return.
It's not possible to talk about global black solidarity for Palestine without discussing Black-Palestinians or Afro-Palestinians themselves. Some Afro-Palestinians trace their roots to the land as far back as the 12th.
Hasan, my mom lost her sister to the apartheid government and my dad's family's land was taken away, driving them into poverty. When we talk about Palestine, they always say that they had it so much better comparatively because at least the government wasn't bombing them every day. Yeah. South Africans that experienced the apartheid always knew that, like, as Nelson Mandela also was reiterating in many different talks that he had, that, like, it was a similar struggle for the Palestinians, if not worse.
12th century, and are descendants of Muslim pilgrims who went to Mecca for Hajj and then settled in Jerusalem. Others are the descendants of those who migrated from places such as Nigeria, Sudan, Senegal, and Chad. Some of them came to Palestine specifically to fight against British colonialism and Zionism.
The second, third, fourth generation, if you ask us to identify ourselves, we say we are Afro-Palestinians. We were born here, we grew up here.
The community is deeply rooted in Jerusalem, with a long history of involvement in the Palestinian liberation movement. Ali Jidda is a leader of Jerusalem's Afro-Palestinian community who served 17 years in Israeli prisons as a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
The African community used to be always among the avant-garde. For example, the first Palestinian female to be put in Israeli jails came from the African quarter.
This was Fatima Bernawi, a Palestinian of Nigerian descent who served 10 years in Israeli prisons. Released in a 1977 prisoner exchange, she was the highest-ranking female member of Fatah. The first Palestinian killed during the Second Intifada in 2000 was Osama Jidda, an Afro-Palestinian shot on his way to donate blood.
With the hard times, tales from the dark side, evidence of the settlements on my hard drive. Man, I swear my heart died at the end of that car ride when I saw that checkpoint. Welcome to apartheid.
Hip-hop artists have also referenced and stood in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle, including Lauryn Hill, who famously cancelled a Tel Aviv concert in 2015.
And Martin Luther King had a dream of the checkpoint. He wake with loud screams from the scenes at the checkpoint. Is Malcolm X by any means at the checkpoint? Imagine if your daily routine was the checkpoint.
Meanwhile, that's M1 in Arabic. I'm pro-Palestinian, does that make me a terrorist? You can catch me in Gaza, in Haifa or Ramallah, but I'm still just Mutulu Olubala. So when I rep with Sharjah, we rhyme with our middle fingers up to the Zionists, cause we don't give a it's justice.
You can't trust the big grip and the smile, and I slay rhymes for Palestinian style.
It's mathematics when they take a black man, put him inside a prison and make provisions for the life he living. It's mathematics when they tell the Mexican he can't come into their own shit that these people f***ing built. It's mathematics with Nate. Go to Palestine and build a wall around the people and call it Israel. Now what's real?
Should I'm way past the minimum. Interim millennium. My raps the holy gat to your back like Palestinian. And this is struggle worldwide, I'm positive. Shit, the ghetto minds worry the Gaza Strip.
Same from my father, born in Ghana, down on that dirt road floor. Far as he came, I can't complain, but pain is so subjective. Spend so much time counting.
These brothers walk so Macklemore could run. Oh my God, bro. Why would you bring that up? Bro, why would you? You can't. Come on now, bro.
Issues, I forget to count my blessings.
This video for Vic Mensa's single, We Could Be Free, illustrates...
By the way, this also literally doesn't even scratch the surface. You got PLO style from the Wu-Tang Clan. You have, there's so much more on top of this.
It's the clear parallels between life under Israeli occupation and life in over-policed black communities in the US. Following the death of Freddie Gray at the hands of police in Baltimore in 2014, uprisings began around the US.
Immortal Technique,
as police
Lupe
reprisals
Fiasco,
escalated in Ferguson, Palestinians took to social media to show solidarity with black communities as well as sharing protest tactics.
And we started getting tweets from Ramallah, and they were like, run toward the wind. Stand closer to the soldiers, because if you stand close to the soldiers, they won't tear gas you, because then they get tear gassed. Yeah. Wrap this shirt around your eyes as a kind of makeshift gas mask. And they had been protesting in the West Bank against what was happening in Gaza.
Many have also drawn attention to the cooperation and joint programs run between the Israeli military.
That's why it's so fun. Like, dude, this shit is like, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's also very, it makes me very angry. But like this is a united struggle against white supremacy and different forms of it globally. It's just police behavior. It's police activity, especially because the oppression that black people face in black communities, systematic underfunding, and ways in which the American government has historically undermined the black community, even after the abolition of slavery and what happened in the Reconstruction era, all the way to the civil rights movement and beyond, is literally is damn near identical, if not worse, in Gaza and the West Bank. And not only that, but also it's the same actors. Like, they're collaborating. It's the same struggle on the one side, and it's the same actors on the other side.
Military and US police forces.
I remember learning that the same equipment that they use to brutalize us is the same equipment that we send to the Israeli military to police and brutalize Palestinians.
Like the Black Panthers, groups like the Dream Defenders and Black Lives Matter continue to push for solidarity with Palestine within an internationalist framework.
I'm black, you met me at DreamCon. Legitimately, the Palestinian with respect to blacks is bullshit. White supremacy are afraid of black people because we're too powerful, so they like to divide. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. It is just a way to try to undermine and like cut divisions in a united front against all forms of oppression that are damn near identical. But especially with the case of Israel, considering that the IDF trains the American police departments, it blows my mind that like there are literal rad libs on Twitter and TikTok just being like, like, I don't think they give a shit about BLM either if they're having this kind of attitude. Like, let's be real. I think they would have the Obama line on Black Lives Matter. Something that many people forget because they were probably too young back then was that Obama wasn't exactly fond of Black Lives Matter either, okay? He said the Ferguson protesters were like thugs. Like, what are we talking about? A lot of liberals at the time also did not appreciate Black Lives Matter either. They considered it to be spoilers. Oh, why are you guys protesting? We have a black president. Why are you guys protesting against the Democratic Party? I'm not, like, this isn't new to me. This is something that I saw. This is something that I experienced. This is something that I was very much against at the time. Now, obviously, liberals love doing revisionist history and acting like they were always on board with BLM, always against police brutality. But yeah, it was even back then, it was something that people analyzed very differently. Yeah, BLM was not popular before the George Floyd execution. BLM, no, it's before that, actually. I'll be honest, it's before that. As someone who tracked this very closely, if you recall, if you were around back then, Black Lives Matter's popularity actually skyrocketed after liberals adopted it before the George Floyd murder, when Colin Kaepernick kneeled. Colin Kaepernick kneeled and and the entire American right went insane on that shit. It was all people were talking about. Donald Trump is perhaps the most responsible figurehead for liberals adopting Black Lives Matter as a popular struggle. Before that, before Donald Trump came out and started lasering Colin Kaepernick and making him like a figurehead, before he actually did that, liberals were also anti-BLM. I still remember the Podjons apologizing for their prior statements on Black Lives Matter, openly on the timeline, saying like, yeah, we were wrong, that this is actually a good and sound and moral cause. Yeah, liberals started changing their attitude towards Black Lives Matter and police brutality after that. And then, of course, it reached its peak popularity as a movement in the aftermath of George Floyd's execution. But it started building up before then. And it was because liberals started getting negatively polarized into defending BLM when Donald Trump took a stance against it. And then, of course, it was quickly commodified, co-opted, and neutered effectively. Yeah, I mean, here, what is this? 2017. If you think protesting racism is unpatriotic but disrespecting military widows isn't, you're probably not a patriot. Hey, I was doing that hypocrisy baiting shit back then. I mean, even way before then, though. I feel like now a lot of them think back on BLM poorly. They learn nothing. Yeah. I remember growing up in STL when Mike Brown was murdered and BLM protests were going on. Liberal media was acting like they are now against Palestinian protesters. Exactly. I agree with the overall points, but you aren't addressing a major point in that discussion, which is black people feeling attacked for voting for Kamala. Man, I don't give a what people think about feeling attacked or whatever. I don't give a shit about people's feelings. What is this like cynical weaponization of identity in this circumstance? Like, look, there's an appropriate way to discuss these matters. Obviously, like what Machino Dorito did, for example, was like silly as it was silly as to be like, to bring up the gruesome execution of Sonia Massey without even bringing up her name and just like immediately using that in like a TikTok to talk about Kamala Harris like that. That is obviously that, like, the way he talked about it is completely understandable that it drew a lot of resentment. It perfectly showcased that like people were like, even if his attitude overall, not his attitude, even if his like ideology overall is on the right side, the way he talked about it made it seem like he just didn't care about the black body there, the person, the victim. It was used as a talking point. But beyond that, when you turn around and you're like, oh, well, black people feels like black people feel bad because they want to vote for Kamala Harris, like, and people are yelling at them for wanting to vote for Kamala Harris. It's like, I don't care. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, what do you mean? What your feelings do not have any basis when we're talking about what is going on. Okay. If you want to talk about the historic black liberation movements and their allegiance with Palestinians, with seeing this as a joint struggle, then that's one thing. If you're going to talk about like Kamala Harris's policies, that's one thing. If you're going to talk about Obama's policies, that's one thing. But if we're going to talk about like people's feelings, like what the fuck are we talking about? I don't give a shit about your feelings. What the hell? I'm not going to be disrespectful because in terms of my own opinions on the matter, I'm not going to cynically use like Sonia Massey's execution like that, because that ultimately also ends up being disrespectful to the victims of white supremacy, a victim of police brutality. But if you're going to talk about like voting for a party, then how is that any different than like what Joe Biden was doing, right? Joe Biden was literally saying, if you want to dismantle me, if you say that I shouldn't be president, then you're anti-black because black people are pro me. That's the most cynical application of the shield I've ever seen. And it was so funny because it was glaringly obvious that it was being deployed to stop a black woman from actually assuming that role. It was so glaringly obvious. You were, what? God forbid we mentioned the fact that black people would be targeted under a police state. How awful and performative. You're doing IDPOL right now. Be for real. What? Every step you take in this direction should be productive. It should be productive. You think black people don't know that they're going to be targeted under a police state? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, they know, dude. The idea that they don't know is actually the dumb part. Like, the assumption that they don't know is stupid. Here, I'll use a term that like everyone can understand. If you're fat, you'll understand this better than everyone else. This is why people say fat shaming doesn't work, because it doesn't. You think fat people don't know they're fat? You think black people don't know white supremacy? What are you going to educate them on it? They experience it. They learn it. It's like how Palestinians learn about hating Israel. They don't learn it at fucking school, okay? They learn it through their everyday experiences. Like, IDPOL is shortened for identity politics. I'm confused about the premise. Who's shaming black people for voting for Kamala? Yeah, I don't even know.
When Israel attacked Lebanon in 2006, renowned writer Toni Morrison signed a statement with other public intellectuals, saying the attacks were a distraction in order to divert world attention from a long-term military, economic, and geographic practice whose political aim is nothing less than the liquidation of the Palestinian nation. Mark Lamont Hill was famously fired from CNN for saying this at a United Nations function.
Local action.
You'll never make me hate. They'll never make me hate you, Mark. That's my goat. That's my king.
An international action that will give us what justice requires. And that is a free Palestine from the river to the sea.
Dr. Cornel West also claims that his vocal opposition to Israeli occupation may have led to him being denied tenure at Harvard. But the sacrifice of black radicals, scholars, and intellectuals in shifting public attitudes on Palestine has not been in vain. Mainstream solidarity with Palestinians is clearly growing in Western countries. In 2021, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, and others all expressed unwavering support for Palestine during Israel's attacks on Gaza, an unprecedented show of solidarity in the history of US Congress.
That means we oppose our money going to fund militarized policing, occupation, and systems of violent oppression and trauma. We are anti-war, we are anti-occupation, and we are anti-apartheid, period.
Just curious if you traveled to the Middle East at all. I know you're from Turkey, but outside of Turkey, no, I have not. But yeah, while we wait for Donald Trump, here's more on the TikTok drama that everyone has been desperate to hear my take on.
CIA is scrolling on their phone on their belly with their feet kicked up, twirling their hair.
I haven't felt this way about TikTok shit since the last time I heard like young black TikTokers talking about how like MLK was actually bad because he slept around with like white women or something. Like that was the last time when I saw that. When I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this is literally like FBI propaganda. Like that was straight up something that the FBI tried to do. Like how the are people just doing COINTELPRO on their own willingly? Like, how the did that happen? Like, how do we arrive at that, man? How the did we arrive at that? Where like people, J. Edgar Hoover would cry at the COINTELPRO TikTok Zoomers can do is crazy. Is crazy.
Watching y'all do their work for them. Dear God, hey. They is giggling and sniggling, child. Watching y'all do the work of destroying Black and Palestinian solidarity all by yourselves. Let me preface everything I'm about to say by saying it does not matter whether Palestinians are anti-Black or not. They don't deserve to be genocided. You know? Black and Palestinian solidarity goes all the way back to the Civil Rights Movement. Whether it is Malcolm X's views on Palestinian liberation, whether it's a Black Panther Party that 60% of Black people said they were proud of at the time, or 46% of Black people also said the Black Panther Party represented their values and their views. These people were anti-imperialist and they were pro-Palestinian liberation. And it's because the same school of thought that says that Black people deserve to die because of insert bullshit reason here is the same school of thought that is bringing y'all to say that because Palestinians are quote unquote anti-Black, we shouldn't care about their lives. It's the same mindset and it's sick. Culture influences politics. It is not a mistake that they are
is literally just the I don't support Palestinians because there's queer phobia, but remixed. Yeah, it's the same exact shit. Also, it doesn't even work with like anti-Black shit because Palestinians are not anti-Black. Like historically, there has never been a moment where Palestinians have not been at the forefront of liberation movements and have offered solidarity and support to like Black liberation in general. So there's no historic basis for it. That's why the jump off point is like one Palestinian Iraqi TikToker who was making a valid point about how obviously America uses Black people and brown people as a shield to do their imperialism, which is objectively correct. It is correct. And people got mad at me when I was talking about this yesterday. Why the do you think it was Colin Powell that was telling the world that like you got yellow cake uranium in Iraq? Why how do you think that happened? There is a deliberate reason for it. It doesn't matter. It's not that these people aren't qualified for the position. It is a part of that qualification as well, that having like a putting forward a black face or a brown face to this oppression and through this to this imperialism is quite literally one of the things that the American government is doing. It's no different than Israeli military doing propaganda by being like, see, look at our Arab soldiers, they love Israel, they love it. It's the same shit. So when you see that, and if you're a black person and you see that Palestinian TikToker crying and maybe even talk about like black people are also participating in the colonialization of the third world, okay, when they're a part of the American forces. When you hear that and it frustrates you, that's an understandable frustration. That's an understandable frustration that you might have, okay? We're like, what the why she say me for, right? You might think that, but it's understandable for you to go back and revisit the situation in your mind, take a deep breath and think, okay, well, there is some validity to what she is saying in terms of like American imperialism, but I'm going to do my very best to advocate for the causes that I believe in, to advocate for justice in Palestine, because obviously your allegiances with people who are oppressed should not be transactional. What are you, a loser? You got no moral compass? Oh man, someone says something mean to me in the group that I'm actually defending. Well, I'll show them, you know? What are you doing? Oh, black people are not rocking with Hasan. Okay, I guess I should be a white supremacist. Like, what are you, stupid?
Literally putting
activism is not transactional. You're fucking delusional. You should do solidarity, okay? You should be unconditionally in support of people that are being oppressed, unconditionally in support of people being blown to goddamn bits with American weapons.
Into the cultural understanding that Palestinians do not deserve solidarity.
The political compass on Insta said you were a human trafficker. Yes, dude. They're delusional. What do you mean? Like, I'm sorry that there's a couple Destiny dick riders in the political compass Instagram page. Why the do you care? Yes, they also compared me to Andrew Tate. Yeah, people say a whole bunch of insane shit about me all the fucking time. I am quite literally explaining to you that none of that matters, okay? Maybe you can make up your own conclusions, make up your own goddamn mind. Sure, those people are going to consistently try and attack me with like random, irrelevant, nonsensical bullshit with defamation. But who gives a You're an adult. You have the capacity to check on your own. And if you are dissuaded by that sort of thing, but then you still at least like venture into this stream, you will very quickly understand what I believe.